Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about non-Ionian modes, that is, modes of scales that can't be transformed into major. Specifically, I want to talk about two parent scales, Harmonic and Melodic Minor. We talked about these a while back, but as a refresher, Harmonic Minor has a raised 7th, and Melodic Minor also raises the 6th. Neither of these are modes of the major scale, nor are they modes of each other, so buckle up, this episode is going to contain a lot of scales. First, I want to point out a couple things about our parent scales. For starters, there's only one note difference, so the modes we get from them are mostly going to sound pretty similar. The signature sound of Harmonic Minor is this augmented second, which will make its modes sound a little more exotic, while Melodic Minors will be smoother, but overall they won't be that different. For instance, let's look at their second modes. The second mode of natural minor is Locrian, and the modes we get here are pretty similar. Harmonic minor sounds like this, with the augmented second between the flat 5th and major 6th degrees. We call this scale Locrian Natural 6. Melodic minor's second mode, meanwhile, has a perfect 5th and looks kinda like we smashed Phrygian and Dorian together. It's not a super common scale, but you can call it Phrygian Natural 6 or Dorian Flat 2. The third mode of natural minor is Ionian, the major scale, and the third mode of harmonic minor takes that and raises the 5th degree, giving us an augmented tonic triad. I like to call this Ionian augmented or augmented major, and melodic minor raises the 4th as well for Lydian augmented. If you find yourself writing over an augmented major 7 chord for some reason, these are probably your best chord scale choices. The fourth mode of harmonic minor sounds like this, with the augmented second between the flat 3rd and sharp 4th degrees. This scale looks kinda like a mix between Lydian and Dorian and is usually called Dorian sharp 4 or sometimes Lydian minor. Melodic minor raises the 3rd, giving us a familiar scale, Lydian dominant, which we covered in our dominant scales video. Speaking of our dominant scales video, we also discussed the 5th modes of both of these scales. Harmonic minor uses Phrygian dominant, while melodic minor has Aeolian dominant. These are two of the best choices for dominant scales when the target chord is minor. The 6th modes get a little weird because remember, the 6th degree is the only note that's actually different between harmonic and melodic minor. So while their 6th modes only really have one note different between them, that note is the tonic and the scales wind up looking completely different. Harmonic minor starts with the augmented second and ends up looking something like this, which we call Lydian sharp 2. On the other hand, if we raise the root a half step, we get this, which looks a lot more like Locrian. It still has that raised 2 though, so we call it Locrian Natural 2. And finally, the 7th modes. Let's start with melodic minor. Its 7th looks like this. And if that sounds familiar, it's probably because we've talked about it twice before. This is altered, the flat everything scale, and for those of you keeping count, it's the 3rd dominant scale that's a mode of melodic minor. But we've covered its use before. What about harmonic minor? We've already flatted everything, so we need to flat the 7 again for a scale I like to call altered diminished. It's an interesting alternative to the more standard octatonic diminished scale. I mean, listen to it. How cool is that? So what do you do with these? Well, some of them are scales you could write in, but many of them are too unstable for that. The best use is usually as chord scales. Tired of playing Dorian over your 2 chords? Why not try Dorian sharp 4 or flat 2? In the end, these are just extra tools to keep in your toolbox that you can bust out when they're appropriate. They tend to sound more exotic and weird than the modes of the major scale, so they're great for adding a little extra flair, or if you just want to justify some cool tensions. And that's the modes of harmonic and melodic minor. Try the exercises, join our mailing list for scans of all our episodes, feel free to suggest future topics in the comments, and keep on rockin'.